The call came while I was standing in line at a pharmacy, holding a plastic basket with toothpaste, vitamins, and a birthday card I didn't plan to send. My phone vibrated once. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. I usually did. But something in my chest tightened before I could think. The way it does when your body recognizes a pattern your mind is tired of explaining away. "Hello?" I said. There was a pause on the other end. Then my mother's voice, careful and polite, like we were distant relatives instead of people who shared a last name. "Evelyn," she said. "It's your mother." My name sounded strange in her mouth, like she hadn't practiced saying it in a while. "I know," I replied. Another pause. I could hear faint background noise. Silverware. A television. Life continuing without me. "We wanted to let you know," she said, "that your brother is getting married." I stared at the rack of candy bars in front of me. The clerk shifted her weight behind the counter. Someone coughed. "When?" I asked. "Early December, just before Christmas." Christmas. Of course. "Congratulations to him," I said. She cleared her throat. "It's going to be a small ceremony, very family-focused." That phrase had always meant the same thing in our house. Decisions made without me. Plans finalized before I was informed. Seating arranged carefully so I wouldn't disrupt the picture. "I see," I said. There was another silence, heavier this time. "We assumed you wouldn't be able to come," she continued, "with your work and all. But I thought it would be respectful to let you know." Respectful. Not inviting. Not asking. Informing. "Thank you for telling me," I said. She hesitated. "Evelyn, your father thinks it might be best if things stay simple, given the tension." The tension. As if it had appeared on its own one day, fully formed, instead of being built slowly through years of exclusion, favoritism, and quiet decisions made behind closed doors. "I understand," I replied. That surprised her. I could hear it in her breath. "Good," she said quickly. "That's good. We just want what's best for everyone." The call ended shortly after. No address, no date beyond a vague month. No mention of whether I was actually welcome. I paid for my things and walked out into the parking lot, the autumn air sharp against my face. I sat in my car for a moment, without starting the engine, the birthday card still in the basket. It was for my mother. Her birthday was next week. I'd already written her name on the envelope. I tore it in half and dropped it into the trash. On the drive home, I replayed the call in my head. Not with anger, but with something colder. Recognition. This was how it always started. A small thing. A phone call. A decision framed as practicality. By itself, it meant nothing. Together, it meant everything. My name is Evelyn Harper. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 years ago, I worked for the family company my father liked to introduce as my life's work. Harper and Stone Construction had been around longer than I had. Founded by my grandfather in the late 1970s, expanded by my father, and quietly sustained by people like me who never made it into the speeches. My older brother Lucas was the face of it. Confident, loud, comfortable taking credit for things he barely understood. I was the infrastructure, contracts, compliance, risk management, the person who fixed problems before they became public. For a long time, I thought that was enough. I was wrong. The shift didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started with a promotion that went to Lucas, even though I'd trained him. Then, a meeting I wasn't invited to about a project I'd negotiated. Then a Christmas bonus that arrived with my name misspelled on the envelope. Small things. Easy to dismiss. Easier to forgive. Until the day I wasn't allowed to sign documents anymore. "We just think it's cleaner if Lucas handles executive approvals," my father said that afternoon, not looking at me. "You're still essential. This doesn't change anything." It changed everything. Within 6 months, my access was limited. My authority quietly removed. My role reduced to execution without input. When I pushed back, calmly, professionally, my mother called me ungrateful. "You always make things difficult," she said. "Why can't you just support your brother?" I left the company 2 weeks later. Not dramatically. No shouting, no ultimatums. I handed in my resignation, thanked my father for the opportunity, and walked out of the building I'd helped keep afloat for nearly a decade. None of them tried to stop me. That was 3 years ago. Since then, contact had been minimal. Holiday text, neutral updates, The occasional comment about how Lucas is doing so well. I'd built a life outside of them. Consulting work, financial stability, a quiet apartment in a city where no one knew my family name. I thought I was done reacting. But the wedding call stirred something I hadn't expected. Not jealousy, not longing. A question. Why now? That night, I opened my laptop and searched for Lucas's name. It didn't take long. There it was, a press release from Harper & Stone's website. Harper & Stone announces strategic expansion and leadership transition. Lucas Harper, President and CEO. My father, listed as Founder Emeritus. And at the bottom, in small print, something that made my breath catch. Privately held assets to be restructured under a revised family trust. A family trust. I stared at the screen, the words rearranging themselves into something heavier. They weren't just planning a wedding. They were planning permanence. And they were doing it without me. That was the moment I understood the call for what it was. Not courtesy, not respect, a warning. And I realized, sitting alone in my quiet apartment, that I had made a mistake. I'd walked away thinking distance was enough. I hadn't considered what they would do with the space I left behind. By the time I closed my laptop, one thing was clear. If I didn't pay attention now, I wouldn't just be excluded from a wedding. I would be written out of everything that followed. And I was done pretending that love which erased me was anything other than control. I didn't call my parents back. I didn't text my brother. I didn't ask for details about the wedding or pretend I was busy that weekend. Silence, I'd learned, made people careless. When you stop reacting, they start revealing things. 3 days after the phone call, I received an email from Harper & Stone. It wasn't addressed to me directly. It was a generic message, the kind sent to vendors and consultants who'd once been on distribution lists and never fully removed. Notice of annual strategic review and board update. Attendance by invitation only. The date was highlighted. 2 weeks from now. A Friday morning. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. I hadn't worked there in 3 years. I wasn't an employee. I wasn't a board member. So why was I still on the list? More importantly, why had no one bothered to take me off? I forwarded the email to myself and closed my laptop. I didn't need more information yet. I needed context. That afternoon, I drove past the old office building for the first time since I'd left. Same glass front, same logo mounted above the entrance, Harper & Stone, brushed metal letters catching the sun. The parking lot was fuller than I remembered. I sat across the street in my car, engine off, watching people go in and out. Employees I recognized, a few new faces. Lucas's truck was parked in his usual spot, angled just slightly crooked, like he never fully corrected it. Some habits don't change. I wasn't here to confront anyone. I wasn't here to be seen. I was here to remember something important. I hadn't imagined my place in that company. I'd earned it. Every contract I'd negotiated, every compliance audit I'd survived, every time I'd smoothed over one of Lucas's impulsive decisions before it turned into a lawsuit. They didn't erase me because I was replaceable. They erased me because I was inconvenient. On the drive home, I called the only person from that chapter of my life I still trusted. Marianne Keller answered on the second ring. "Evelyn," she said, warm and surprised. "This is a nice change." Marianne had been Harper & Stone's outside counsel for years. Smart, unflappable, old enough to have seen families tear themselves apart over less than what mine was attempting now. "How busy are you?" I asked. She laughed softly. "Busy enough to be useful." "What's going on?" "I received an email," I said, "about a strategic review and a family trust." There was a pause. Not long, but deliberate. "Ah," Marianne said, "so they haven't told you." "Told me what?" "That your name came up," she replied. I pulled over to the side of the road, heart steady but alert. "In what context?" I asked. "In the context of omission," Marianne said, "which is usually louder than inclusion." I closed my eyes. "They're restructuring assets," she continued. "And when family businesses do that, attorneys ask uncomfortable questions, like who should be protected and who might contest. Contest. "Did you advise them?" I asked. "I advised them to be careful," Marianne said, which they interpreted as being discreet. That sounded like my parents. "I'm not asking you to represent me," I said. "Not yet. I just need to know one thing." "Ask." Is there a trust already in place? Yes, she said, without hesitation. Established years ago. Amended once. Recently. Amended recently. And am I named in it? I asked. Another pause. This one heavier. You were, Marianne said. I don't know if you still are. I thanked her and hung up. That night, I slept poorly. Not from anxiety, but from a strange sense of familiarity. This was the same feeling I'd had the week before I resigned. The moment when you realize something is happening without you, and the only question left is whether you'll allow it. The next morning, I requested a copy of my grandfather's will from the county records office. I hadn't thought about him in years. Not because I didn't care, but because my parents had spoken about him like a closed chapter. Something settled, something finished. But wills have a way of staying relevant. The clerk emailed the document that afternoon. 47 pages. Dense. Legal. Easy to skim. Hard to understand without context. But one line stood out. Any interest held in Harper & Stone construction shall be governed by the Harper Family Trust, as amended. As amended. I printed the page and folded it carefully, like it was something fragile. By the end of the week, the picture was clearer. They weren't just consolidating control. They were locking doors. The wedding, I realized, wasn't the main event. It was a distraction. A way to frame the narrative. New beginnings. Unity, continuity, all the words families use when they're about to decide who counts and who doesn't. The following Monday, another email arrived. This one was personal, from my mother. Subject, quick question. Evelyn, your father wanted to know if you still have copies of any old company documents. We're cleaning out files and thought it might be helpful to check. Helpful. I read it twice and smiled. I did have copies, not because I was hoarding. Because when you work in compliance long enough, you learn that memory is unreliable and paper is power. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened a locked drawer in my desk and pulled out a thin folder labeled simply H and S. Inside were emails, drafts, and signed documents I'd saved over the years. Nothing stolen, nothing unethical, just things I'd been copied on. Things that had my name attached, and things that proved I hadn't imagined my role. At the bottom of the folder was something I'd forgotten about. A memo from 5 years ago. Subject, contingency planning, key personnel risk. It was addressed to my father. Written by Marianne. It named me specifically. Evelyn Harper's departure would create immediate operational exposure. Recommend formalizing her authority or ensuring protective provisions are in place. My father had replied with a single sentence. Not necessary. Family handles family. I closed the folder. For the first time since the wedding call, I felt something solid settle in my chest. They hadn't just underestimated me. They'd documented it, and that meant something. I finally replied to my mother's email. Yes, I wrote. I have copies. Let me know exactly what you're looking for. Her response came quickly. Oh, no need. We've got it covered. Just thought I'd ask. Of course. The meeting was still 2 weeks away. The wedding was 3 weeks away. And somewhere between those dates, decisions were being finalized that assumed I wouldn't interfere. They assumed I would stay quiet. They assumed I would accept being erased again. They were wrong. But I wasn't going to announce that yet. Because the best way to reclaim power isn't to demand it. It's to let people believe they already took it from you. The strategic review meeting happened on a Friday morning, exactly as the email had stated. I didn't attend. That was intentional. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, a cup of coffee gone cold, and a printed copy of my grandfather's will spread out in front of me, like a map I was finally learning how to read. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for structure. People think wills are about money. They're not. They're about control after silence. About who gets to decide when the original voice is gone. By noon, Marianne Keller called me. They're moving faster than I expected, she said without greeting. Tell me what they think they're doing, I replied. They approved a preliminary restructuring of the Harper Family Trust, she said. Lucas is being positioned as the primary beneficiary of voting interests. Your parents are trustees, jointly. I exhaled slowly. And me? You weren't mentioned, Marianne said. Which is different from being excluded. I frowned. Explain. Exclusion is explicit, she said. Omission is reversible. And dangerous. That was the second time she'd used that word. Dangerous. They also approved a plan to transfer certain legacy assets into the trust before the wedding, she added. Legacy assets. I closed my eyes. My grandfather's lake house, the one place in our family where no one argued. He'd bought it in his 40s, long before Harper and Stone became what it was. A modest place at first, expanded slowly over decades. It was where I learned to swim, where my brother learned to fish, where my grandmother taught me how to keep quiet without disappearing. It wasn't just sentimental. It was unencumbered property, and it mattered. They can't just move it, I said. They think they can, Marianne replied. Because they believe no one will challenge them. There it was again. Belief. What aren't they considering? I asked. Marianne was quiet for a moment. Your grandfather was more careful than they remember. After we hung up, I pulled the county records for the lake house. It took 3 searches before I found what I was looking for. A quiet transfer deed, filed 12 years ago. My grandfather had moved the property into a limited holding entity, Harper Lake Holdings, LLC. At the time, it had seemed unnecessary. He told my grandmother it was just paperwork. But paperwork has memory. I scrolled further. Operating agreement. Members. Harold Harper, 60%. Evelyn Harper, 40%. My name. I sat back in my chair, heart steady, mind sharp. 40%, not a majority, but I read the operating agreement carefully, slowly, twice, then the third time. Section 7.4 made my breath catch. Any transfer, encumbrance, or assignment of property held by the LLC requires unanimous member consent. Unanimous, not majority. Unanimous. They couldn't leverage it. They couldn't move it into the trust. And I was certain they'd forgotten that, because no one had ever treated my name like it carried weight. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I wrote a single note on my legal pad. They're building without checking the foundation. That afternoon, my brother called me. Lucas never called unless he wanted something. Hey, he said, too casual. Mom said you got the wedding news. I did, I replied. She was worried you'd take it the wrong way. I didn't, I said. I took it accurately. He laughed. You always say things like that. Do I? A pause. So, he continued, Dad mentioned you might still have access to some old documents. We're cleaning things up, getting organized. I heard, I said. We don't want to step on toes, Lucas said, especially with everything you've got going on. That was new. Acknowledgement. What exactly do you need? I asked. Well, he said, there's some confusion about legacy holdings. The lake house paperwork in particular. I closed my eyes. Confusion. I'm not confused, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. Right, he said. I just meant, you probably don't need to be involved. I imagined him standing somewhere comfortable, phone tucked between shoulder and ear, assuming the conversation was already leaning in his favor. I am involved, I said calmly. Evelyn, he sighed. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. This is just formalities. It doesn't change anything. I'd heard that sentence before, when my authority was removed, when my role was minimized, when my exit was reframed as choice. I won't interfere, I said. As long as you don't. He laughed again, uncertain now. What does that mean? It means I expect to be consulted on anything involving Harper Lake Holdings, I said. In writing. Silence. You're serious, he said. Yes. You don't even live there, he snapped. That's irrelevant, I replied. Ownership isn't about proximity. He lowered his voice. You're being difficult. No, I said. I'm being precise. The call ended abruptly. That evening, my mother sent another email. Subject, please call. I didn't. Instead, I forwarded the operating agreement to Marianne. Her response came within minutes. Well, she wrote. That changes the timeline. How much? I asked. Enough, she replied, that they'll have to acknowledge you. A week passed. No calls, no emails, no wedding details. Then a courier envelope arrived at my apartment. Inside was a formal notice. Request for member consent. Harper Lake Holdings, LLC. They wanted my signature. No explanation. No apology. Just a line at the bottom, where my name was supposed to go. I held the paper in my hands and felt the shift. This was it. The moment where I stopped being invisible and became inconvenient. I didn't sign it. I didn't return it. Instead, I drafted a response. 1 page. Clear. Polite. Firm. I acknowledge receipt of your request. I do not consent to any transfer or encumbrance of LLC assets at this time. Any future discussion must occur with counsel present. I sent it by certified mail. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to what my family was doing. I was shaping what they couldn't. And somewhere in a house decorated for an upcoming wedding, plans were unraveling quietly. They just didn't know it yet. They didn't respond to my letter right away. That told me more than any argument ever had. In my family, silence was never neutral. It was a tactic, a way to regroup, reframe, decide who would speak and what version of the truth would be presented. Growing up, silence always meant something was happening without me. This time, I let it happen. 3 days passed, then 5. On the 6th day, my mother called again, not from her cell, from the house line. The number I'd memorized as a child before I knew what it meant to brace myself. I watched it ring until it stopped. 10 minutes later, a text appeared. Please call me. This doesn't need to be so formal. Formal. The word almost made me laugh. Everything they were doing now was formal. Lawyers, trusts, operating agreements, documents designed to last longer than feelings. I waited until that evening before responding. I'm comfortable keeping things in writing, I texted. It's clearer that way. The typing bubbles appeared almost instantly, then disappeared, then reappeared. Your father is very upset, she finally wrote. He feels blindsided. I read that sentence twice. Blindsided. By paperwork he hadn't bothered to read. By a clause he'd forgotten, because it involved my name. I set my phone down and didn't reply. The next morning, Marianne called. They're scrambling, she said without preamble. How so? Your father contacted another firm, she replied. Someone aggressive. Someone who doesn't know the history. That won't help them, I said. No, Marianne agreed. But it will escalate things. That was fine. Escalation wasn't something I feared anymore. Not when I wasn't the one cornered. They're also delaying the trust transfer, she added. The lake house is holding everything up. I pictured it then. The place my grandfather had protected quietly, without fanfare. How he'd never raised his voice, never threatened, just structured things so that no one person could take more than their share. He'd known. What's their next move? I asked. Marianne paused. They'll try to get you to waive consent voluntarily. How? Appeal, she said. Emotion. Obligation. The wedding. Of course. 2 days later, the invitation arrived. Not electronically, not casually. A heavy cream envelope, my name handwritten in my mother's careful script. Inside was a formal wedding invitation. December. Early afternoon ceremony. Reception to follow. A seating card tucked neatly inside. Family table. I stared at those words longer than I should have. This wasn't reconciliation. It was choreography. They needed me present, smiling, visible. Proof that everything was fine, that no one had been excluded, that nothing had gone wrong. The invitation wasn't about me. It was about appearances. That night, Lucas called again. His tone was different this time. Measured, controlled. Did you get the invitation? He asked. I did, I replied. Good, he said. Mom was worried it might have gotten lost. It didn't. A pause. Look, he said, lowering his voice. We don't need to make this a whole thing. It's a wedding, a trust, paperwork. It doesn't have to turn into this. This, I repeated. You mean consequences? He sighed. You know what I mean. I know exactly what you mean, I said. You want my consent without my involvement. That's not fair, he snapped. It's accurate, I replied. He was quiet for a moment. What do you want? He finally asked. It was the first honest question he'd asked me in years. I want what the documents already say, I said. Equal consideration, legal process, and no assumptions made on my behalf. You're holding everything hostage, he said. No, I replied calmly. I'm preventing you from taking something that isn't yours, alone. Another silence. You've changed, he said. Yes, I agreed. I stopped confusing loyalty with surrender. The call ended shortly after. That weekend, I drove to the lake house alone. I hadn't been there since my grandmother's funeral. The place looked the same. Quiet, still, untouched by urgency. I unlocked the door and walked through each room slowly. the worn wood floors, the view from the back porch, the old desk in the corner where my grandfather used to keep his papers. I sat there for a long time, thinking, this house wasn't just property, it was leverage. But more than that, it was proof. Proof that my grandfather had seen something in me worth protecting, long before anyone else bothered to. On the drive back, my phone buzzed. An email from a new attorney, not Marianne. Subject: request for discussion, Harper Family Matters. I forwarded it to Marianne without opening it. Her reply came quickly. They're trying to intimidate. Don't engage directly. I didn't. Instead, I drafted my RSVP. I will attend the ceremony. I will not attend the reception. I will not sign any documents or discuss business matters at the event. I sent it to my mother. Her response was immediate. That's unreasonable. I typed back. So was removing my authority without discussion. We're past reasonable. We're in reality now. No reply. The next week was tense but quiet. No more calls, no more emails. Just the hum of something shifting under the surface. Then, 4 days before the wedding, a courier arrived again. Another envelope. This one was different. Inside was a revised proposal. They were offering to buy out my interest in Harper Lake Holdings. A generous number. More money than I'd expected. At the bottom, a note in my father's handwriting. Let's put this behind us. For the family. I read it carefully. They weren't trying to include me. They were trying to remove me. I closed the folder and set it aside. Money had never been the point. Control had. And now that they couldn't quietly take it, they were trying to purchase my silence. I didn't respond. Not yet, because I finally understood something my family never had. The moment you rush to resolve conflict is the moment you give up your advantage. And I wasn't done watching them reveal theirs. I didn't tell anyone about the buyout offer. Not Marianne. Not friends. Not even myself. At first. I let it sit on my dining table for 2 full days. The folder unopened after that first read. Like an object that could speak if I listened long enough. It wasn't the amount that unsettled me. It was the timing. 4 days before the wedding. After silence. After pressure. After they realized they couldn't move forward without me. This wasn't generosity. It was urgency. On the 3rd morning, I finally called Marianne. They're offering to buy my interest, I said. She didn't sound surprised. How much? I told her. She whistled softly. That's not a market number. That's a make-it-go-away number. That's what it felt like, I said. They're afraid, she replied. And fear makes people sloppy. I don't want the money, I said. I know, Marianne said. But how you refuse it matters. That afternoon, I read the buyout proposal line by line. There were conditions buried in the language. Waivers, non-disparagement clauses. A requirement that I relinquish any future claims related to Harper & Stone or associated entities. They weren't just buying the lake house share. They were trying to erase me legally. I closed the folder and felt something settle in my chest. Heavy, but steady. This was the moment. Not the wedding. Not the trust. I drafted a response with Marianne's guidance. I do not accept the proposed buyout. I am open to discussing governance protections and long-term stewardship of Harper Lake Holdings. Any future communication should occur through counsel. No emotion, no justification, just refusal. The reply came faster than I expected. Not from my father, from my mother. Evelyn, please. You're turning this into something it doesn't need to be. Your brother is getting married. Your father is exhausted. Can't you let one thing be simple? Simple. I stared at the message until the words blurred. When had anything involving me ever been simple to them? I didn't answer. Instead, I booked a hotel near the wedding venue. 1 night. No family accommodations, no shared space. If I was going to be present, it would be on my terms. The night before the wedding, I received a voicemail from my father. His voice sounded older than I remembered. I don't understand why you're doing this, he said. We gave you opportunities. We took care of you. This feels like punishment. I listened to it once, then deleted it. Punishment would have required anger. What I was doing required clarity. The wedding day arrived cold and bright, one of those early winter days where the light feels sharp. I dressed carefully, neutrally, nothing attention-grabbing, nothing apologetic. When I arrived at the venue, Heads turned. Not because I looked different, because they hadn't expected me to come. My mother saw me first. Her smile froze for half a second before she recovered. "Evelyn," she said, hugging me tightly. Too tightly. "I'm so glad you made it." "I said I would," I replied. Lucas approached next. He looked tense, jaw tight, eyes flicking toward our parents and then back to me. "Thanks for coming," he said. "It means a lot." I nodded. "Congratulations." The ceremony was short. Beautiful, even. Lucas's fiancée looked genuinely happy. I felt a flicker of something like relief that at least one person there wasn't part of the calculation. During the reception, I kept my distance. Polite conversations, neutral smiles. I avoided the family table. That didn't go unnoticed. Halfway through the meal, my father joined me near the back of the room. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Not here," I replied. His jaw tightened. "You're embarrassing us." "I'm not causing a scene," I said. "I'm just not playing one." He lowered his voice. "What will it take for you to let this go?" I looked at him then. Really looked. He wasn't asking what would be fair. He was asking what would be quiet. "I'm not holding anything," I said. "I'm standing where the documents put me." He shook his head. "You always had to make things difficult." I felt something click into place then. Not anger, understanding. "No," I said softly. "I just stopped making things easy for you." I left shortly after. As promised, I didn't attend the reception dinner. I didn't linger for speeches. I didn't wait to be noticed. "They've requested an emergency meeting," she wrote. "About the trust, about the lake house, about everything." I sat on the edge of the bed, heels kicked off, dress folded neatly over the chair. "They're out of time," I replied. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I attended with Marianne. In person. No calls. No intermediaries. My parents sat on one side of the table, Lucas beside them. A new attorney at the far end, flipping through papers too quickly. This time, I didn't feel outnumbered. I felt prepared. They talked first. About unity. About legacy. About how my grandfather would have wanted peace. Then Marianne slid a single document across the table. A copy of the operating agreement. Highlighted. "Unanimous consent." "This hasn't changed," she said calmly. "And neither has Evelyn's position." My father looked at the page like it might move if he stared long enough. "What do you want?" my mother asked finally. I answered without hesitation. "I want the trust amended to reflect equal beneficiary language," I said. "I want independent trustees, and I want written assurance that Harper Lake Holdings remains outside any family trust." Silence. "That's extreme," Lucas said. "It's protective," I replied. My father exhaled slowly. "And if we refuse, then nothing changes," I said. "Which means you can't move forward." They exchanged glances. This time, they knew I meant it. The meeting ended without resolution. But something had shifted. They were no longer trying to erase me. They were trying to negotiate. And that meant I'd already won something they never thought I deserved. A seat. Not at their table, at my own. The week after the meeting moved slowly, like the air before a storm. No one called. No one emailed. The silence felt different this time. It wasn't strategic. It was uncertain. They didn't know what to do next. I went about my life as usual. Client calls, deadlines, morning runs through the park. I didn't hover over my phone or wait for updates. If they reached out, they would do it on my timeline now, not theirs. 3 days later, Marianne called. "They're divided," she said. "That doesn't surprise me," I replied. "Your father wants to push forward anyway," she continued. "He thinks you'll eventually fold. Your mother wants to fix this emotionally. Lucas is panicking." I smiled slightly. Panic was new for him. "What about the attorney?" I asked. "He's advising compromise," Marianne said. "Not out of fairness, out of risk management." That mattered. Because when lawyers stop pushing and start managing risk, it means the leverage has shifted. That afternoon, I received an email from Lucas. Not forwarded, not filtered. Direct. Subject. "We need to talk." I read it once and closed it. An hour later, another message came through. "Please, just you and me, no lawyers." That was interesting. I waited until the evening to respond. "If you want to talk, it can be with counsel present," I wrote. "Otherwise, there's nothing to discuss." His reply came almost immediately. "You've turned into someone I don't recognize." I stared at the screen. "No," I typed. "You just don't benefit from who I used to be." There was no response after that. The following Friday, something unexpected happened. I received a call from my Aunt Rachel, my father's younger sister. We'd never been close. She lived out of state. Showed up for holidays occasionally. Quiet observer. Rarely took sides. "Evelyn," she said, "do you have a minute?" "I do," I replied. "I heard about the lake house," she said carefully. Of course she had. "And the trust," she added. "Yes," she sighed. "I don't want to interfere, but I want you to know something." I waited. "Your grandfather argued with your father about that property for years," she said. "Not about money, about power." I leaned back in my chair. "He told me once," she continued, "that if he didn't structure things carefully, one child would end up swallowing the rest." I swallowed. "He wanted you protected," she said, "specifically." That word landed heavier than anything else had so far. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked. "Because telling you would have meant admitting they couldn't control the outcome," she replied. "And your father doesn't like that." We talked for another 10 minutes. Not about strategy, not about documents, just context. When we hung up, I sat in silence, letting it settle. This wasn't just about what they were doing now. It was about what they'd been trying to undo for years. The following Monday, Marianne forwarded me a draft. Proposed trust amendment. My name appeared in it, explicitly, as a beneficiary. Equal language. Independent trustees named. It wasn't perfect, but it was movement. "They're offering this in exchange for your consent on limited asset transfers," Marianne explained. "Limited how?" I asked. "They want to move certain business interests," she said. "Not the lake house." I considered it. They backed off the one thing they couldn't touch. That wasn't generosity. That was acceptance. "What's your read?" I asked. "They don't like it," Marianne said, "but they understand it." I took the rest of the day before responding. Not because I was unsure, because I wanted to be deliberate. When I replied, I asked for 2 additional provisions: a sunset clause on trustee authority and a written acknowledgement of my ownership interest in Harper Lake Holdings, filed and notarized. No verbal assurances, no implied respect. Paper. They didn't answer right away, but the next morning, Marianne called. "They agreed," she said. Just like that. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The signing was scheduled for the following week. Neutral location, conference room, no family dinner attached, no celebration. When I arrived, everyone was already seated. My parents looked tired. Lucas looked smaller somehow. No one spoke at first. We signed, initialed, reviewed. When it was done, my father cleared his throat. "This didn't have to be like this," he said. I met his eyes calmly. It did. He looked like he wanted to argue, then thought better of it. As we stood to leave, my mother touched my arm. "You know we love you," she said quietly. I didn't pull away, but I didn't lean in either. "I know what love looks like to you," I replied. I needed something different. She nodded once. No tears, no protest, just acknowledgement. On the drive home, I felt something unfamiliar. Not triumph, relief. They hadn't changed, but they'd stopped pretending I didn't matter. That was enough. And as the city came into view, I realized something else. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the point where I stopped being reactive. From here on out, everything would be by choice, including how much of them I allowed back into my life. After the papers were signed, everyone seemed to expect something from me. Not explicitly. No one said it out loud. But it hovered in the pauses, in the careful way my parents spoke when we crossed paths. In the messages Lucas didn't quite finish typing. They'd conceded ground. They'd acknowledged me, on paper. Now they wanted harmony as payment. It started subtly. My mother sent a text 2 days after the sign. "I made soup. Too much. Do you want to stop by?" I stared at the message for a long moment. This was how re-entry always began. Food. Familiar gestures. Comfort offered as proof that everything was fine now. I didn't respond. That weekend, Lucas emailed. Subject: quick question. He wanted my input on a contractor dispute, a situation I would have handled automatically years ago. The kind of problem that landed in my lap because I was good at cleaning up messes without being seen. I forwarded it to Marianne. Her response was immediate. "If you answer this, you reset the pattern." I didn't reply to Lucas. On Monday, my father called. I answered this time. "We need your help," he said without preamble. "There's an issue with a permitting delay on the Crestview project." "I'm not part of the company," I replied. "You know the system better than anyone," he said. This would go a long way. Toward what? I wondered. Goodwill? Forgiveness? A return to quiet labor without authority? "I'm not available," I said. There was a long silence. "You're still angry," he finally said. "No," I replied. "I'm consistent." He hung up. That afternoon, I felt it for the first time. The discomfort, not guilt, not doubt, pressure. They'd agreed to protect my position legally, but they hadn't adjusted emotionally. In their minds, the deal had restored order, which meant I was expected to resume my role. Supportive, helpful, secondary. I wasn't angry about it. I was done with it. 2 days later, my Aunt Rachel called again. "They're struggling," she said carefully. "Not with the paperwork, with the shift." "I expected that," I replied. "They don't know how to relate to you without being in charge," she continued. "That's not my responsibility," I said. "I know," she agreed. "But I wanted you to hear it from someone who isn't asking anything of you." I appreciated that more than she probably realized. The following week, Harper & Stone hosted a holiday open house. Employees, partners, local officials, the kind of event designed to signal stability and success. I wasn't invited, at least not officially, but my name appeared on the program as a member of the Harper Family Trust. That was new. I heard about it from an old colleague who texted me a photo. "They're finally acknowledging you," the message read. I stared at the image. My name was there, correctly spelled, properly placed, and completely divorced from my presence. I felt nothing. That night, my mother emailed. Subject: the open house. "We missed you tonight. People asked about you. I told them you were busy, but well." I closed the message without responding. Being spoken for had always been her specialty. A few days later, Marianne called with an update. "The trust amendment has been filed," she said. "Everything is enforceable now." "Good," I replied. "There's something else," she added. "Your parents asked about revisiting governance roles next year." I laughed softly. Of course they did. "They're testing boundaries," Marianne said, "seeing what access still exists." "What did you tell them?" "That you're not interested in operational involvement," she said, "unless you tell me otherwise." "Thank you," I replied. After we hung up, I realized how different things felt now. Before, every interaction had carried risk. Saying the wrong thing could cost me access. Silence could be interpreted as rebellion. Now, silence was just silence. I didn't owe them reassurance. I didn't owe them presence. I didn't owe them my competence. That clarity came with a cost. The cost was disappointment. They'd wanted a version of me that accepted inclusion as compensation for years of exclusion. What they got instead was distance with boundaries. On Christmas morning, my phone buzzed. A group text from my parents and Lucas. "Merry Christmas. We hope today brings peace." Peace. I stared at the word, then typed a response. "Merry Christmas. I hope the same. Nothing more." That afternoon, I spent the day alone. By choice. Not avoidance, choice. I cooked for myself, took a long walk, read. At sunset, I drove past the lake. I didn't stop. I didn't go in. I just kept driving, knowing it was there, protected. Not as leverage anymore, but as something solid that didn't require my constant defense. That night, I understood something I hadn't before. Winning doesn't feel the way people think it does. There was no rush. No satisfaction in watching them adjust, just space. And space, I was learning, was the most valuable thing I'd ever claimed. Because now, every decision about my family wasn't about fear of loss. It was about preference. And for the first time, I was allowed to have one. January came with a brittle kind of quiet. The holidays were over. The forced cheer, the strategic messages, the careful language. Everything settled into a new normal that felt unfamiliar to all of us, especially to them. For years, my value had been tied to usefulness. I solved problems. I smoothed edges. I absorbed stress so others didn't have to. Even after I left the company, that role lingered in their expectations. But now, with boundaries in place and lawyers as buffers, something shifted. They didn't know what to do with me if I wasn't fixing anything. The first sign came from Lucas. He stopped reaching out. entirely. No requests, no updates, no passive-aggressive check-ins masked as concern. Just silence. At first, I thought it was relief, for both of us. Then Marianne forwarded me an email. Internal. Not meant for me. Lucas had written to the board, proposing a new internal compliance officer, a role I'd once filled unofficially, without the title or pay. He'd described it as a necessary evolution now that the company was operating independently of legacy assumptions. Legacy assumptions. I smiled when I read it. They weren't missing me. They were, and that was fine. But a week later, my mother called. This time, I answered. "Evelyn," she said, voice thin. "Your father had a medical episode." I felt my chest tighten, just slightly. "What kind?" I asked. "Nothing serious," she said quickly. "Just exhaustion, stress. The doctor said he needs to slow down." I waited. "He's been reflective," she continued, "about the business, about family." I knew where this was going. "He asked if you might come by," she said. "Just for dinner. No agenda." No agenda had always been the agenda. "I'm sorry he's not feeling well," I said, "but I'm not available." There it was, clean, unemotional. She inhaled sharply. "You don't want to see your father after everything?" "After everything," I repeated, "is exactly why I don't." Silence. "You've become very distant," she said. "Yes," I replied. That was intentional. She didn't argue. That told me more than anything else could have. A few days later, I received a letter, handwritten, from my father. Not typed, not emailed, paper. "Evelyn, I don't know how to speak to you anymore. I feel like I lost something I didn't realize I was holding. I thought if we fixed the structure, the rest would follow. It hasn't. I don't know where we went wrong, but I know I miss my daughter." I folded the letter slowly. This wasn't manipulation. It also wasn't accountability. It was grief. But grief without responsibility attached to it. I didn't respond, not because I was cruel. Because responding would have pulled me back into a dynamic where my presence was used as proof of healing, without the work to support it. That same week, something else happened. I was offered a partnership, not at Harper & Stone. At a consulting firm I'd been working with quietly for months. The offer was clean, transparent, fair. No family name, no history, just respect. I accepted. When the press release went out, my phone buzzed constantly. Colleagues, clients, congratulations. Then a message from my mother. "I saw the announcement. I didn't know you were doing something like that," I replied once. I didn't think it was relevant. She didn't answer. That was the moment it clicked. They weren't losing me. They were losing access. And without access, they had nothing to leverage. 2 weeks later, Harper & Stone announced a restructuring delay. Nothing dramatic, just a postponement. A recalibration. The new compliance officer quit unexpectedly. A permit issue resurfaced on a major project. Lucas emailed Marianne, asking if she knew anyone who might consult temporarily. Marianne forwarded it to me with a single line. "They're learning." I closed the email without responding, not out of spite, out of completion. I drove to the lake house that weekend. For the first time in months, I stayed overnight. I built a fire, cooked simply, sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the water shift under a pale winter sky. I thought about usefulness, how easily it becomes a substitute for love. How often women are taught that being needed is the same as being valued. I'd lived that lesson for years. I was done living it now. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no rehearsed conversations, just rest. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was quiet. No emergencies. No expectations. No one needing me to be smaller so they could stay comfortable. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I'd stepped away from my family. I felt like I'd stepped into myself. February arrived with a muted kind of gray. Not heavy, just honest. The lake was still frozen when I drove back to the city. The trees bare and patient. I'd stopped thinking of that place as leverage. It had become something else entirely. A reminder that some things are worth protecting quietly, without announcing it. 2 days later, the invitation arrived. Not from my parents, from Lucas. It was an email this time. Short, direct, no emotional padding. "We're having a small family dinner next Sunday. No business, just dinner. I'd like you to come." I read it once. Then again, it didn't ask for anything. It didn't reference the trust, or the lake house, or the company. It didn't apologize either. It simply assumed the right to gather everyone again. I waited a full day before responding. "I'm not comfortable with family dinners right now," I wrote. "If you want to talk, I'm open to a one-on-one conversation in a neutral place." His reply came hours later. "That's disappointing." I didn't respond. Disappointment had lost its power over me. That week, Marianne called with another update. "Your parents have started referring to the trust as finalized," she said, "which means they've accepted that this is permanent." "Good," I replied. "They're also asking questions," she added, "about what you want long-term." I laughed softly. "They're about 10 years late for that." "I thought you'd say that," Marianne said. "But it's still progress." Progress didn't always mean movement toward me. Sometimes it meant movement away from control. At my new firm, the pace was different. Decisions were discussed, not dictated. My input was asked for, not assumed. I didn't have to prove my value by over-functioning. That adjustment was harder than I expected. I'd built my identity around competence, around being the one who noticed what others missed. Now I was allowed to just be effective, without being consumed. One afternoon, my assistant knocked on my office door. "There's a call for you," she said. "Your father." I stared at her for a moment, surprised. "Did he say what it was about?" I asked. "He said it was personal," she replied. I took the call. "Evelyn," my father said. His voice was steady, quieter than usual. "Yes, I won't keep you long," he said. "I wanted to tell you something." I waited. "I've stepped back from daily operations," he said, fully. "Lucas is on his own now." I absorbed that. "And?" I asked gently, and I realized, "I don't know who I am without the company," he admitted. "That's not your burden. I just thought you should know." This was new. Not regret, not defensiveness, recognition. "I hope you find something that fits," I said. He exhaled. "I hope you have." "I have," I replied. We hung up without ceremony. Later that evening, my mother texted, "Your father told me you spoke. He seemed lighter afterward." I typed, then erased, then typed again. "I'm glad he's taking care of himself. Nothing more." A week later, Rachel invited me to lunch. "I wanted to see how you were doing," she said. "I'm well," I replied. She smiled. "You look it." We talked about ordinary things. Work, weather, books. Then she said, "Your mother is struggling." "I know," I said. "She thought once the paperwork was done, things would go back to normal," Rachel continued. "She doesn't understand that the structure was the easy part." "That's because the structure didn't ask her to change," I said. Rachel nodded slowly. "You're right." That night, I received a calendar invite from my mother. Subject: dinner? No explanation. No date filled in. Just a question mark. I declined. Not because I was angry, because I wasn't ready to pretend. The next morning, I realized something important. Every invitation they sent now wasn't about drawing me back in. It was about reassuring themselves that they still could. And every time I said no, gently and clearly, that illusion weakened. They were learning what I already knew. Inclusion without respect is just another form of control, and I wasn't interested in going back to that. March came in quietly, without ceremony. No family events, no invitations, no urgent messages disguised as concern. The absence felt intentional now, not punitive, like they were finally testing what life looked like without pulling me back into orbit. And I was letting them. At work, my days were full in a way that didn't drain me. I had authority without resistance, responsibility without emotional cost. When problems came up, they were discussed openly, solved efficiently, and then left where they belonged. No one needed me to be smaller so they could feel bigger. That was new. One afternoon, while reviewing a contract, I noticed my phone buzzing repeatedly. Unknown number. Then another call. And another. I finally answered. "Evelyn?" a woman said. Professional. Calm. "This is Claire Donovan. I work with Harper & Stone's outside accounting firm." I stiffened slightly. "Yes? I hope this isn't a bad time," she continued. "I'm calling because we've run into an issue regarding historical documentation." I didn't respond right away. "There are discrepancies," she said carefully, "from several years back, periods where compliance oversight was Unclear. I almost smiled. And you're calling me because? I asked. Because your name appears on earlier filings, she said. As the responsible officer. There it was. They'd removed my authority. They'd replaced my role. But they'd kept my name where it protected them. I closed my eyes briefly. I'm no longer affiliated with Harper & Stone, I said evenly. I haven't been for 3 years. Yes, we're aware, she said. But we were hoping you might clarify. No, I interrupted. Not sharply, just definitively. I won't. There was a pause. I see, she said. May I ask why? I opened my eyes. Because when I asked for authority, I was told it wasn't necessary, I said. You don't get to ask for protection now. She thanked me politely and hung up. I sat back in my chair, heart steady. For years, I would have explained. I would have softened it, justified it, helped anyway. That reflex was gone. That evening, Marianne called. They reached out to an accounting firm, she said. They're looking for someone to retroactively certify compliance. Good luck, I replied. She chuckled. They're learning the difference between access and entitlement. 2 days later, my father emailed me. Subject: a question. Evelyn, we've been advised there may be complications related to prior oversight. Would you be willing to discuss this? Not as a favor, just as clarity. I read the email once. Then I deleted it. Not out of spite. Out of alignment. I didn't owe them clarity. They'd chosen confusion when it served them. On Saturday morning, I ran into my mother at a grocery store. Completely unplanned. Same aisle, canned soup. She froze when she saw me, then smiled tightly. Evelyn, she said. What a surprise. Hello, I replied. We stood there for a moment, surrounded by labels and fluorescent light. You look well, she said. I am. She nodded. I heard about the accounting issue. Of course she had. I thought you might help, she continued softly. Just to make sure nothing comes back to hurt the family. I looked at her. Really looked. For the first time, I saw not control or manipulation, just fear. But fear doesn't create obligation. I won't be involved, I said. Her eyes filled slightly. Why are you being like this? I answered honestly. Because every time I helped before, it cost me something, I said. And no one noticed until I stopped. She opened her mouth, closed it. I'm not punishing you, I added. I'm choosing myself. She nodded slowly, like someone absorbing a language they didn't speak. We parted without another word. That night, I am not responsible for the systems that erased me. A week later, Harper & Stone delayed another project. Rumors circulated quietly. Nothing public. Yet. Lucas didn't call. My parents didn't text. The space between us stretched, not painfully, but clearly. And in that space, something important happened. I stopped rehearsing conversations that would never take place. I stopped imagining apologies that wouldn't come. I stopped explaining choices I'd already made. That was the day I realized the story had shifted again. This was no longer about inheritance, or the lake house, or the company. It was about something simpler. I was no longer useful to them, and instead of feeling rejected, I felt free. By April, the tension had thinned into something quieter. Not resolution, not peace, acceptance. The kind that comes when people realize they can't force a version of the future they were counting on. I didn't hear much about Harper & Stone anymore. What filtered through came indirectly. Delays, resignations, a contractor dispute that made local news for a day before disappearing again. Nothing catastrophic, just erosion. That's how systems fail, when the people holding them together are removed without replacing the function. Only the title. One afternoon, I received a letter at my office. Not from a law firm. Not certified. Handwritten. My mother's handwriting. I didn't open it immediately. I placed it on my desk and finished what I was working on first. That alone told me how far I'd come. There was a time when a letter like that would have hijacked my entire day. When I finally opened it, I read slowly. Evelyn, I've rewritten this letter more times than I can count. I keep trying to sound like a mother who knows what she's doing. The truth is, I don't. I thought if we held the family tightly enough, nothing would fall apart. I see now that what I called holding on was really holding you back. I won't ask you to come over. I won't ask you to fix anything. I only want you to know that I'm sorry for the years I confused control with love. You didn't imagine what you felt, and I should have protected you better. I folded the letter carefully. This was different from before. No requests, no urgency, no attempt to redirect the outcome. Just words, placed where they might land or might not. That night, I didn't respond. I slept on it. In the morning, I wrote back, "Mom, I read your letter. Thank you for acknowledging what you did. I'm not ready for a relationship right now, but I appreciate the honesty. I hope you take care of yourself. Evelyn." 4 sentences. Clear. Bounded. True. She replied 2 days later with a simple acknowledgement. "I understand. Thank you for replying. Nothing more." That was enough. A week later, Rachel invited me to a small family gathering. Not a holiday, not an event, just coffee at her place. She made it clear my parents wouldn't be there. I went. It was easy. Conversation flowed without tension. No one monitored my reactions. No one waited for me to say the wrong thing. When I left, Rachel hugged me and said, "You did the hard thing. Most people never do." I didn't correct her. The hardest thing had already been done. In early May, Harper & Stone announced a change in leadership structure. Lucas would be stepping back from day-to-day operations. An external COO was being brought in. The press release framed it as growth. I read it once and closed the article. It wasn't my story anymore. That same week, I finalized the last paperwork for Harper Lake Holdings. Everything was filed, confirmed, and insulated. No ambiguity. No loopholes. I drove out to the lake again, this time with intention. I walked the property line slowly, not as an owner guarding territory, but as someone acknowledging continuity. My grandfather's foresight, my presence in it. Quiet, but real. I sat on the porch as the sun dipped low and felt something settle. Not vindication. Closure. The kind that doesn't announce itself. Later that night, Lucas emailed me. Subject: "I owe you this. Evelyn, I don't know if you'll read this, but I need to say it. I benefited from a system that worked because you made it work. I told myself it was natural, that it just happened that way. It didn't. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I see it now." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied. I read it. "Take care, Lucas." That was all. No reopening. No rebuilding. Just acknowledgement, without entanglement. As spring deepened, something unexpected happened. I stopped thinking about my family every day. Not because I was avoiding the thoughts, because they no longer governed my emotional weather. They were part of my history, not my present. And for the first time, that felt stable. I realized something then. Apologies don't heal relationships. They clarify them. They tell you whether there's a door worth reopening, or whether the healthiest thing is to let it stay closed. I had clarity now. And clarity, I was learning, is a kind of peace. By the time summer arrived, my life no longer revolved around what my family might do next. That was how I knew the story was ending. Not with a confrontation, not with a dramatic reunion, not with a final argument where everything was said and everyone cried. It ended with quiet momentum. My work settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. I chose projects instead of being chosen by crises. I worked with people who didn't need me to overextend myself to prove my worth. When I said no, it wasn't questioned. When I said yes, it was respected. That was new. One afternoon in June, I was asked to speak at a small industry panel. Nothing prestigious, no headlines, just a room of professionals talking honestly about governance, succession, and the hidden costs of family businesses. I almost declined. Then I realized something. I wasn't declining because I didn't want to speak. I was declining because I'd been trained to stay quiet. So I accepted. When it was my turn, I didn't tell my story directly. I didn't mention names or betrayals or documents. I spoke about structures, about how businesses collapse not because of conflict, but because of avoidance, about how the most dangerous sentence in any organization is, "We don't need to formalize that." People nodded, took notes. Afterward, a woman about my mother's age approached me. "Thank you," she said. "I wish I'd understood this before I handed everything to my oldest son." I smiled gently. It's never too late to protect yourself. That evening, I drove home with the windows down, feeling something close to pride. Not because I'd been validated, but because I hadn't needed to hide. A few weeks later, My father emailed me again. Short. Measured. I'm stepping away fully at the end of the year. Retirement. I wanted you to hear it from me. I read it once, then replied, I hope you find rest in it. That was all. No bitterness, no expectation, just closure that didn't require my participation, beyond acknowledgement. In July, I hosted a small gathering at the lake house. Not family. Friends. Colleagues. People who knew me as I was now, not as a role I'd once filled. We cooked, laughed, sat by the water as the sky softened into evening. At one point, someone asked, does it feel strange owning a place like this on your own? I thought about it. It doesn't feel like ownership, I said. It feels like stewardship. Later that night, alone on the porch, I thought about everything that had happened. The phone call that started it. The wedding I attended, but didn't perform in. The documents that forced recognition. The silence that followed. The apologies that arrived only after power shifted. I realized something important. Revenge isn't always about taking something back. Sometimes it's about refusing to give yourself away anymore. My family never imagined I would walk away without asking for approval. They never imagined I would choose distance without anger. They never imagined I would stop explaining. But that's exactly what I did. I didn't punish them. I didn't expose them. I didn't destroy anything they built. I simply removed myself from the system that depended on my silence. And without that silence, everything changed. In August, Marianne and I met for coffee. You know, she said, smiling, this is the part most people miss. What part? I asked. The part where you don't replace one power structure with another, she said. You replaced it with autonomy. I thought about that on the drive home. Autonomy. The ability to choose without needing permission, to say yes without fear, to say no without guilt. That was a real inheritance. Not the lake house, not the trust language, not the documents with my name restored. It was the moment I stopped trying to be included in a system that only worked when I disappeared. If you're listening to this story and something in it feels familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't need to earn your place by staying quiet. You don't owe loyalty to people who only value you when you're useful. And you're allowed to step away without making it dramatic. Boundaries don't need applause to be valid. Distance doesn't mean bitterness. And choosing yourself is not betrayal. It's survival with dignity. This wasn't a story about winning against my family. It was a story about reclaiming authorship over my own life. And that's where it ends. If this story resonated with you, if you've lived through family drama, betrayal, being excluded, or quietly erased, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories about karma, boundaries, and the kind of revenge that doesn't burn everything down, but still turns the tables. Your story is still being written, and you're allowed to choose how it goes.